Good morning, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay from over here?
Great.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us for our November GSPAC meeting. It is currently 11:02, and I'm going to go ahead and start us off in roll call. And just so everyone is aware, we do have some folks joining us in the conference room C of the board of the county courthouse, and then we also have some of our friends on Zoom. So I'm going to go ahead and do roll call, starting with Brenna Sullivan, Lake County Farm Bureau.
Good morning, I'm here.
And Pat Scully with Scully Packing Company.
Here.
Good morning, Pat.
Morning.
David Pizza Farming Company. All right, I don't see David Bray. Oh, I see.
Oh, hi, I'm here. Sorry, I didn't hear.
And then we have Peter Windrum with the Chi Council for the Clear Lake Hitch.
Here.
Morning, Peter.
Morning.
The Kelseyville Unified School District. I see Kyle.
Yeah, sorry, Kyle here.
Thank you, Kyle. And then Sarah Rye with Big Valley Band of Pomo Indians.
Good morning.
Morning, Sarah. Scott Horning with Lake County Special Districts.
I am here.
Good morning, Scott. Valerie Nixon with the Lake County Land Trust.
I'm here, and I'm sorry I do have to leave a little early today.
Thank you for letting us know, Val. And Sky Hoyt, we have in person groundwater well owner. Want to say hi, Sky?
Hi, I'm here.
And then Marina Del Jonas, Lake County Watershed Protection District. Did I miss anyone in the GSPAC members? All right, seeing none. So just to make sure that everyone knows who is here and who is not here. So I'm gonna have folks go around the room that are in person, and please just introduce yourself very briefly. And then if I did not call on you on the Zoom, go ahead and introduce yourself. I'm gonna start off with Eddie Teasdale.
Eddie Teasdale, Ludovic Scaminini Consulting Engineers.
Thank you, Eddie.
Jordan Beaton, Water Resources Technician.
I'm Christy Clark with Stantec.
Public. Thank you. And then do we have, let's go ahead and do our Ludorf and Stantec team. Please introduce yourself via Zoom.
Tori Klug with Stantec here.
Thank you, Tori.
Ibrahim Kadam with Stantec.
Thank you, Ibrahim.
Mali Karami Golbaghi with Stantec.
Thank you. Good morning.
Hey.
Maritza Flores with Stantec.
And Ritza. Let's see. There's Will.
Hello, everybody. William Fox with Lake County Water Resources.
Thank you, Will. And then I believe we have Dave with DWR. Awesome.
Good morning, Dave Palais with DWR. I'm sorry, I'm not going to do the video. I have bandwidth limitations.
You are good. That's fine. Thank you for joining us, Dave. So let's go ahead and do the review and approval of October 22nd, 2021 minutes. Will, can you please pull those up on the screen? And then the folks that are here in the courthouse, we do have those available hard copy. So let's just give it a few minutes. And then if you have any questions, comments on the minutes, please share those now, GSPAC members. And then we'll take public questions briefly. And as folks are reviewing the minutes, I do want to just let folks know that we do have a tightly packed agenda as we usually do. So we will have ample time at the end for Q&A. So I will kindly ask that if you have any questions, please save those near the end. But if you do have something that's super pressing, please feel free just to interject. And if there are no questions or comments on the minutes, I'm looking for a GSPAC member to review.
Marina, I'm sorry, can you, I'm looking for these via email. Is it easier to find them on the website?
Yeah, it might be easier to find them on the website. Will, you could please pull those up. But if you want to go to the website, if you go to advisory committee documents, and then if you go to the October 22nd, they are on the website under the minutes. Thank you, Will.
Let me know if people need me to scroll as well.
For everybody.
I've also shared the link to the meeting notes on the Zoom chat if people want to access it individually.
All right, do we
I
have,
had, Marina, I had a couple questions.
go ahead.
Thank you. On the minutes on page 11, where it is, it's in the section for surface water depletion. So the MT lowest historical spring groundwater elevation plus operational flexibility margin. There's been a little, I just want to make sure with the terminology of this, some of the comments that Big Valley and our consultant gave when the documents first came up was that we saw that what was being used for the lowest historical spring groundwater elevation were in most, statistical reviews of things would be considered outliers because most of the data was in kind of a higher range of groundwater elevation. And we were concerned that things that were statistically, out of the norm were being used as the lowest groundwater elevation. And that the MT, and not questioned, and that the MT was being used, was being based on these, what really look like outliers. And so we provided those comments, and seeing this, so when the documentation was at the last meeting was reviewed by all of us and also voted on, I'm, still seeing this language, lowest historical spring groundwater elevation. So I'd like to have some clarification on what exactly was used as kind of the draft final that this is referring to, so that the minutes can be clear what is actually being used.
All right, thank you for your comments, sir. Does anyone have anyone on the tech team?
Ibrahim.
You are muted, Ibrahim.
Hello. So yeah, we have did a statistical test of two standard deviation and kind of took out those outliers outside these two standard deviation. And the key driver for some of these outliers is kind of for everyone knows, just not just because of this dry condition. Sometimes I think we confirmed with William and others who does wells, sometimes the wells might be on or just being turned off and not turned off for long enough. And when we take the groundwater sample, it actually does not represent the static groundwater elevation, but actually the well might still be recovering, or in some cases the well must be on. And that's the source of these kind of very extreme values. And so we did a statistical test of two standard deviation, which represent the 95 percentile confidence. And that's basically the value that you use to calculate to identify the minimum groundwater elevation in the spring.
So to clarify, there were some values in the graphs that we saw that were outside of the range of pretty much all of the other points. And so I'm wondering.
So those points on the curve, so any map on the document that have the orange dots that show the spring, all of those points excludes the point that outside the two standard deviation. So only points within the two standard deviation are shown and plotted in orange. And actually you could see that some of points were going higher or lower on the spring on those values. So the graphs has been modified to reflect those, and those were shown in the last meeting and also shown in the public draft.
Okay, so in terms of the wording of this, then it's the original that was shown to us has now been modified to be within the two standard deviations for at least the surface water groundwater interconnectedness graphs, it sounds like. And there have been some of the lower points removed because they were outside the two standard deviations, that evaluation that you did, right?
Correct, yeah. So the original graphs that it kind of started referring to was those shown on the meeting on October 8th. On the meeting we had on October 22nd did not have these outliers in them. And neither the one that's shown right now on the public draft document.
Okay, so just for clarification purposes, I just at least like to have it in the minutes that even though the wording is saying the lowest, sorry, I'm trying to pull it up again, that it's the lowest historical values, it's actually after being the data being corrected for removing the statistical outliers.
Correct.
I don't think you did that removal of data points for other sections, just this particular, the surface water groundwater interconnectedness because of our concern with that.
I think we checked that also for the groundwater elevation. And so we did that for the groundwater elevation and for the groundwater chronic groundwater elevation, as well as also for the interconnected surface water. There wasn't any apparent outliers with the other metrics.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that when it's saying lowest historical, that it's actually with some statistical corrections in that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And we have noted that too, Sarah.
Thank you.
Do any of the other GSPAC members have comments on the minutes before I open it up to the public? Okay, we do have a question here in the conference room. Go ahead, Joan.
Yes, Big Valley groundwater update. It says there have been 29 reported dry wells in Lake County. Lake County Water Resources. Well, and then later on it questions, not all wells are in DWR's record. I know of a lot of dry wells that have not been reported, and where do people go to report their dry wells?
Yes, so that is a reoccurring question that is continuously coming up. So we look at the California Department of Water Resources, My Dry Well Tracking Tool, which William has brought up to us. That is where people go and report dry wells.
So how many people know that?
And that's what we're trying to get the word out. So people can call us. If they call us, we get that information. If they don't feel comfortable sharing their APN or their address, we can't report that. If they just say, I have a well in this area, we need that APN to submit that actual report.
I really question only 29 dry wells.
Exactly.
I really question that.
Yes, and we're right there with you, Joan, and that's why we need to get that information. We encourage people, if they don't know about this tracking tool, they can call us, they can call public health, they can really call any county department and they'll send this to us. We get those calls all the time, but the issue is people don't feel comfortable sharing their information to submit the actual report. So that's what we're running into. So only 29 have been reported. Are there more out there? Possibly. It's likely. We can only go off of this My Drywall tracking. If people submit those reports to us, but they don't give us the APN, we have.
There's no way you can read their mind.
Exactly. I wish. I'm working on it. Trust me. I'm working on it. I haven't gotten that far yet.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions or comments from GSPAC members or members of the public? All right, so right now I'm looking for a member of the GSPAC to approve the minutes with the added notes from Sarah Ryan and the clarification.
I move that we approve the minutes with the added notes from Sarah Ryan.
Thank you, Val. Can I please get a second? I, Maria Deladonis, Lake County Water Resources Department, second the minute. Oh, I see Sarah too, gave a thumbs up. All right, thank you, Sarah. All right, so let's move on to the very brief update on current groundwater and drought related conditions. Will, can you please throw that My Drywall tracking back on the screen again? Thank you so much. All right, and Will, do you mind reading us the number? It doesn't look like we've had much changes.
Yeah, there's been no dry wells reported in the last 30 days. It says when I highlight it over all the ones in Lake County, it's 27 recorded between 31 days and 365 days ago.
Okay, and I have not received any calls. Our department has not received any calls from anyone else reporting dry wells. We do have resources on the Water Resources website for folks to submit those dry well reports, and then also to obtain resources for assistance if the well does go dry. Just another quick note before I take comments. The lake is currently at negative 1.38 foot Rumsey, so it has come up a little bit. We are appreciating the rain. If folks do want to get on that daily listserv of getting the current weather conditions and the lake levels, please email us at water.resources@lakecountyca.gov, and we are more than happy to put you on that listserv. So with that, I see Sarah has a hand raised. Go ahead, Sarah.
Thanks, Marina. Could you explain the process of communication between Department of Water Resources and the Environmental Health Department or Division regarding dry well information collection? Because my understanding is that many people are calling the Environmental Health Director, Craig Weatherby, and so I would just like to understand the process of how he communicates that to you, or if he does, and his particular numbers that he's tracking, even though understanding that some people, for whatever reason, don't want to have it officially reported. At least there's an internal Lake County number of dry wells, and obviously the rains have helped some, so that's a good thing. But do you have an internal number from the with the communication that's been happening with directly to Water Resources and also to Environmental Health, and then also what's that process of communication?
Yeah, and that's a good question, Sarah. So thank you for that. So Craig and I are in constant communication. Usually what Environmental Health does is if someone calls and tries to report a dry well, they send it straight to us. They just transfer it over to our department. We get those calls and then we submit the reports if they provide that information. So Craig, he hasn't provided me any updates on recent calls that they get. And he isn't really counting, people, oh, I have a dry well, and he tries to get the information and they don't provide it. He can't really count that because we don't even have a rough idea of where those dry wells are. So in order for us to help them, it's important for us to get that information and submit those reports, because we can't submit those reports if we don't have the accurate information, because then we're skewing the data and we don't want to do that. So that's one thing, is I'm trying to be more transparent and be more, I hope, welcoming, and folks, if they feel comfortable in submitting those reports, sending those to us. But again, we have a close communication with Environmental Health. Any dry well report that they get, if they're talking to people, if they do want to submit a report, they send them directly to our department and we assist in that process. but we have not received any new dry well reports since the last GSPAC meeting.
Okay, so there's no, he's not doing any internal, neither of you, neither of the departments are doing any internal counting of dry wells that don't get officially reported.
No, not if we don't get an idea of where even throughout the county that they're getting reported. They give us an idea of, oh, North County, oh, South County, but it, you know, ideally Lower Lake area, Middletown area, whereabouts, and they won't, oftentimes they won't give us that information. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, I can confirm that there's tremendous hesitancy from the public to report dry wells. On our radio show, Fire and Drought, we have asked people with dry wells to call and tell us about them. I think we probably heard of secondhand hearsay of 7 dry wells, but we just aren't getting people telling us that. And we actually are an alternative, non-governmental way to report your dry well. Not saying what we do with it, we don't have enough to know what we do with it, but at least we hear it and we know it, and it would be like a public resource of sorts that we could, you know, that could be aired or we could talk about it on air, you know, but so that's just, there's tremendous hesitancy. And you're right, why? That's a huge question. I don't think we want to talk about that today,
Yeah.
but I do question, we talk about 29 dry wells in Lake County. Aren't we here about the Big Valley Basin? And shouldn't we be really looking at what dry wells are in the basin and where are they located like that? Isn't that more of our focus today?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, any other questions before we move forward down to the next agenda item?
Marina, just a follow-up of that discussion. I just wanted to make a recommendation that the county keeps an internal tally of the dry wells, even if it doesn't get officially reported, because, you know, knowing the hesitancy of people wanting to report doesn't mean that it's false information. So I love the fact that people are feeling comfortable to let Sky and Olga know on their show, because it's a great show. But I think, you know, we should have some sort of way to be tracking those things even internally, just to, and of course, especially in the Big Valley Basin. So I would just like to make that recommendation that you find a way to track it, just to say that it's happening within the borders, and to see if people can narrow it down just a teeny little bit for you. That would be great to be holding on to that type of information and reporting on that.
Yeah, and I can work, and that's a great recommendation, Sarah. I can work with Craig to get something before the next GSPAC meeting. I can get that, you know, some sort of Excel table going, and that way we can show you the rough numbers and the rough estimates on what, you know, we are getting funneled through, what we can, you know, get from people. And I encourage folks, if you hear anything as well, please feel free to reach out to us directly. If you are getting folks reporting dry wells to you, especially in our Big Valley Basin, give us a call, get that, so then we can get that tally going. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and move it forward, and I'm gonna pass it over to William. Thank you for sharing your screen, to do a brief update on the Airborne electromagnetic surveys.
All right, everybody. So we got to speak with Ramble, the consultant company that is procuring the AEM for the groundwater basins across Lake County. And we heard they've already moved on to Sonoma County, so they completed their AEM flight over the Lake County groundwater basins. Due to some complications, they were actually not able to fly in Scotts Valley. It had to do with the pilot being uncomfortable with the flight. And so they were not able to do the flight across Scotts Valley. Thank you to everybody who did help me work to push that contract through and get the community backs behind it. They were able to fly around 75% of the Big Valley flight lines that they had proposed. They ended up changing whatever the proposed flight lines were a little bit. I think that was also based off of the pilot's recommendations. So this happens where the consultant Ramble plans everything, and then it does come down to the pilot's decision at the end of the day, because they're flying the equipment and they're taking on the liability. So they're kind of at the whim of the SkyTem flight pilots. So disappointing that they were not able to fly over Scotts Valley, but they were able to fly over Big Valley. Ramble will be processing that data in the next couple months, and we should be seeing the results probably early 2022, spring 2022. So we look forward to that, and hopefully we can use that data to submit some more grants and get some more improved monitoring data and just have a better understanding of the basin in general. And they were able to fly a little bit of the intersection between the Scotts Valley and Big Valley basin. So hopefully we'll have a better understanding of the interaction between those two basins as well. I see you have a hand up, Sarah. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question. Given the fact, so it was shared with us at a couple of these meetings, I believe, that the way the technology is that there's trouble getting good data when flown over vineyards, and I'm guessing it's because of all of the metal that's, you know, the whatever you call those things, I forget them, the stakes,
Yeah.
the rebar and all that. So how are you factoring in just the data? Is it that no data is going to be coming from anywhere where there's rebar in those stakes, or that there's some data but it's going to be you know, just it's going to be really challenging to use what's given? And maybe that's also a Stantec question, I don't know. But yeah.
So from my understanding is that basically with the AEM technology, it can go down to 1,000 feet depth and around 200 feet like width kind of. So you will be capturing kind of data in both vertical and horizontal directions with the AEM technology. And you are correct, we aren't able to fly, or the data kind of gets messy when it is flown over the vineyards because of the metal T-stakes. And it kind of depends. Ramble doesn't have all the answers. This is something that they recently learned about in the past couple months before they started this with the T-post trouble. So they are trying to still process that data. It has been hard, but they use basically well logs and driller completion reports to verify their data. So I think if the data that they got kind of lines up with the driller information, then they confirm it and they're using it. If it's quite different, then they sometimes have to toss it out and it can't be used. But they haven't been able to see or process the data yet, so they're unsure of how much of it is usable. But that is a possibility that some of the data is not usable because of that, but that's why they try to strategically place their flight lines to avoid heavy vineyard areas. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, do you have a percentage of land over, or do you have a percentage of the Big Valley Basin that you believe will not be necessarily getting good data because of vineyards being present?
I don't have a percentage, but the flight lines that I saw, again, the flight lines have changed, so I don't know what the final flight lines ended up being, but they were pretty, they pretty much covered the basin pretty well, although there were gaps. You're not allowed to fly over cities as well, so we couldn't fly over Kelseyville proper, so that area was excluded. The Rancheria was excluded. So there is areas definitely excluded. I can't give you a percentage off the top of my head, but the flight lines, they were drawn in linear ways that kind of spread across the basin. So it did have a good spread across the basin. So I think it will characterize the basin pretty well. But again, I want to leave that to the experts at Ramble. I don't want to speak about the data before they've got their hands on it. So.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So thank you, Will, for that update. Are there, we'll take one more question if there's another question about AEM. Awesome, we're gonna move forward. So let's go ahead and just do just a quick reminder that our draft GSP is out for review. Yay! We are taking public comments until December 3rd, and you can submit public comments by 3 different ways. You can submit them to us in person. We can drop those comments off at the Lake County Courthouse on the 3rd floor. Come see us at Water Resources, and we are happy to take those comments. You can send them via email to water.resources at lakecountyca.gov. And you can put, please put draft GSP comments in the subject line. And then you can also, did I say mail? You can mail them to us to the Lake County Courthouse, 255 North 4th Street. If you need assistance printing out a hard copy of those, please call us at Water Resources and we can help provide that. It is a pretty lengthy document. You can also find all those chapters on the Water Resources website. Will, if I can have you very quickly, if you're available, to go to the Water Resources website to walk folks through that. If not, we did just do an open house on that yesterday, which that presentation will be on the website today. We're able to walk through how to find those draft GSP chapters and how you can submit those public comments to us. The draft GSP does have the lines, so please refer to those lines as you're making those comments. And Will is walking us through how to get there. And all the chapters are there and available via PDF. So if you have any questions and you need assistance, do not hesitate to give us a call. Please encourage your friends and your folks, especially those residing in Big Valley, to review that draft GSP and submit public comments. We are taking those public comments and it will help us make sure that we build the best GSP that we can for our basin. Do we have any questions? Go ahead, Sky.
Well, I have a comment. Based on the attendance, the public's attendance at last night's meeting, I would say that each and every one of us, the advisory committee members, we have to do everything we can to do outreach to let the public know that this is happening. And just to let people know that after the meeting in the BOS chambers, Peter made a great suggestion about getting, and correct me if I'm misquoting you, Peter, but to make a short fact sheet about what was happening. And it was agreed, I guess, basically in concept that that would be done bilingual. And I don't know, we don't have an idea when that's going to be available, but I would say that would be a resource that all of us advisory committee members would want to use to do outreach. So, I mean, as far as I know, we only had one member of the public in the meeting last night.
One virtual, I think, and one in person. Yeah, so two.
Okay, so the David and the virtual, we think that wasn't David Weiss, I guess, anyway. So one or two, not many, but clearly. But did David just raise his hand?
Was that you, David, that joined us via Zoom last night?
Yeah, that was me.
Okay, thank you.
So we're down to one person who I brought.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think the advisory committee members, we have to take it upon ourselves to get the word out to the people of Lake County. You know, that's really important. And I think this fact sheet idea that Peter came up with is fantastic. And the willingness to make it bilingual in just a short period of time, we really need to stay focused on that. And as soon as it's available, get it out to the members so we can use that for outreach.
And the target is, Sky, to do that by December, by the time we start to have the GSPAC meeting or any other public meeting in December.
Yeah, well, I'd say the fact sheet, be better get it way sooner so we can get started. I mean,
The bilingual portion of it might take us about a week, so
Yeah.
just assembling it and putting it together.
yeah, and what's the date of the next public meeting? Let's revise
Well,
that.
the next GSPAC meeting is the 17th, yeah, December 17th, so probably around that same time,
But the next public meeting is,
probably around the same time.
okay, so it's pretty quick.
Yeah, and we do have a press release that was sent to all different media distributors on behalf of the county. So if any GSPAC members or if any members of the public want a few copies of those, we can go ahead and print those out. And if you want to place around anywhere that you would think would be beneficial, I'm also getting that translated to Spanish as well. So we'll have that available then. And thank you for throwing that press release up. It has all the information, all the instructions, our contact information, and how you can build those public comments. And that's also on the Water Resources website. So if anyone wants hard copies of those, go ahead and just email us and we can print those out for you. We can meet you and hand those off, socially distanced, of course, but we're more than happy to help in that aspect.
And then also to share any social media.
Yes.
That get done, share those widely.
Yeah. And then, thank you for that, Christy. Yeah, so County of Lake on Facebook shares and then also Water Resources share. So be sure to share those. Social media can be our friend at times. So Sarah, go ahead. You have your hand raised. Thank you for being patient.
Oh, yeah, no worries. So I'm glad to see a press release went out, and I'm sorry to hear about last night that only one member of the public came. So the press release went out. Do you know if any of the local media did an article on it, or at least posted the the press release? And what do you think about the possibility of having an article done by, you know, by any of the media in the county?
Yeah, great
Like an
question, Sarah.
interview.
Yeah, so we sent this press release, Water Resources, we created it, and then we sent it through our county admin, and they send it to all the different media relations. So they send it to the radio shows, the newspapers, on Facebook as well. So they are the ones that are able to send it to us. I was inquired from Elizabeth Larson with the Lake County News, who did have an additional question. So I'm hoping that she'll be running an article. I'll follow up with her, but you know, I'm more than happy to, you know, get the word out in any way possible. If we need to do an additional article, I can schedule that. All the information is there. And again, anything that we can do to get that word out. If I need to do an interpretive dance, what have you not, we're open. We just want to get this word out. So whatever ideas that you guys have. But to answer your question, Sarah, yes, I've been in communications with some of the newspapers, and I'm hoping that they'll be doing an article. And I will follow up once the article is published. If it is, I will share that around to you folks as well. So you guys have that on hand and you can pass that around if you hadn't already seen it. Any other questions about the draft GSP? All right, thank you, Will, for sharing your screen. Let us go ahead and pass it over to Eddie. Who is gonna take it over now, and Eddie is gonna be sharing with us the integrated hydrologic model.
Thank you. And I think, William, I'm going to try to share my screen just so I can kind of move things around a little bit. So let me just see if I can pop this up here. Okay. I'm getting close.
You might have to click on the little Zoom box to the right.
This one?
Yeah. And then click on that. Yeah, so click on the arrow you see. You want to click on it right here?
Let the young people show us how to use the technology.
And then if you want to, yeah. There you go. So yeah, you'll just share that screen.
All right, we're getting close. Just
Yeah.
thanks for your patience.
Thank
Let's
you.
see.
There are much bigger counties that have nothing like this.
Really?
Yeah, really impressed.
So what, do you guys see my screen? I'm in share mode, huh?
You're in presenter view.
Yeah, give me a sec here. I gotta get out of that.
I'll stop hovering over you.
No, that's fine.
I think if you just press display settings and then switch.
Yeah, I don't, it's hidden by the Zoom.
You can move the Zoom window. Yeah, pull it, just put a cursor on it and pull it up, down.
Okay. Okay, I'm getting close, I promise. Now, do you guys see everything?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay,
But do you see that? Okay. It's just
I think we just can see the presenter mode.
all right. Gotta move some things around here so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, we're ready to go. So what I'm going to do today really is sort of focus in on agenda item 5, which is an update on the model development. And then also, as you all know, the most important thing that comes out of the model is how we develop the water budgets that are required under Sigma. So I'm going to touch on that as a sort of the second part of this presentation. So kind of jumping in initially to the model development, we have a tech memo that's included, I believe it's Appendix 2D. And it details all of the model sort of platform, the development, the results, some of the projections that we have to make, and then also recognizing that there's limitations in the model. And we also include some recommendations on what to do as we move forward. So again, that's available for folks to review, and please provide comments on that as we move forward. Moving on to slide 3, just, I gotta move some things around here so I can see what I'm doing. We know we really tried our best to keep this model as physically based as possible, recognizing we don't have all the best data sets. So I want folks to recognize that, you know, when there was available data, we utilized it. When there was not, there has to be sort of professional decisions made. But again, everything we made is based on physically based. But I also want to clarify, and this is a statistician back in England, George Box had this quote, and some folks like it, some folks don't. All models are wrong, but some are useful. So please recognize that this is not a magic crystal ball. This is just a tool that we're going to utilize, and it's going to be improved as we kind of move through the GSP process. So it's you know, as my old boss used to say, it's not a magic crystal ball, but it can be a useful tool. Okay, quickly about calibration. So again, because it's physically based, give me a sec, Dave, let me get through this. We tried, and we've talked about this a couple of times, the model calibration piece. We're trying to calibrate the model to sort of measure real data. So we do that, obviously, you can see the graphic on the left is for groundwater elevation. So these are wells that are utilized to measure water levels. And so we're calibrating the model to that. So in this example, again, this is just a quick overview, but we're looking at simulated groundwater elevations on the y-axis, and then we're looking at observed groundwater elevations on the x-axis. And so ideally, if the model was perfect, it would all the data would plot along this 45-degree line. Okay, as I mentioned, all models are wrong, some are useful. So we do see in some areas where the model is not a perfect fit. Could we go back and improve that with time? You bet. Could we artificially go in there and insert maybe unrealistic data to make it match? Yes, but we just feel like right now, based on what we know, we don't want to sort of fit the model. We want to utilize the data to sort of fit the model. So that's groundwater elevations. And then on the discharge, this is for surface water. Again, it's a sort of similar plot, but we're looking at simulated discharge versus observed discharge. So you can see generally on the lower flow rates, we get a pretty good match. But as we start to see higher flow rates, in some cases where the model is actually underestimating the flow. So we'll recognize in that error, we document that in the model documentation, and we'll kind of look to improve that as we kind of move forward. So I thought I saw Dave, your hand was up. You had a quick question?
Yes, Eddie. So just about the model, who's developing it? Who owns it? Who owns the data? How is all of that? Not that I want it. I'm just wondering how is the model paid for and maintained, and under whose control is it?
Sure. So the county owns the model. At some point, that information can be shared with whomever because it was developed with public dollars. But ultimately, the county is sort of the gatekeeper of the model itself. But there's a willingness to share that at some point as we kind of move through this process.
Is the development done by Ludorf and Scaminini or somebody else?
Yeah, we did it all in-house. Yeah, Ludorf and Scaminini.
Thank you.
Just again, moving through calibration. This is just an example. Again, there's a plethora of this information in the tech memo. In this example, we've got a couple of hydrographs, so you can see the black dots are measured water levels. In this case, from the wells we've identified on the insert there, and then the green line is actually the simulated head. So in an ideal condition, the observed and calibration would be similar. Again, in some cases we maybe underestimate or overestimate the seasonal fluctuations, but again, this is sort of a standard practice. And again, we've got hydrographs generated for all of the monitoring wells or the well locations that are shown in the graphic to your right. So I mentioned this, and I'll maybe mention it one more time, and you'll probably get sick of me saying it. All models are wrong, some are useful. So I wanted to kind of show you how this model could be utilized, when we're talking about projects and management actions, looking out into the future, what could we do with this model? So this is just an example of something that we were sort of discussing internally about, like my perspective, I think you all know, is I feel like the groundwater system is very healthy. And so what I wanted to try to look at, or a couple of us wanted to try to look at, was like, look, if we were to put in some extra wells or utilize extra existing wells, and those wells are kind of shown with the red dots there. And if we were able to, perhaps in some cases, be it during the dry period, during droughts, if we were to do some kind of stream flow enhancement project. So the idea would be we'd pump wells, groundwater, we put that into the creeks, in this case, Kelsey Creek and Adobe Creek, just to help supplemental flows. So those flows could be helped to address the fish stranding issues or enhance recharge. So again, it's just a concept, no decisions have been made, but I wanted to run this through the model out into the future to see what would happen. So this is an example where what we're doing is we're actually utilizing the wells that are in red. They're some of them are real wells, some cases they're just sort of hypothetical well locations. We pump those wells at a certain rate for a certain time period during the year. And then that water, instead of being applied to a field, to trees, to vineyards, we put it in the creek, just a concept. And then the idea is, what would that happen? What would happen if we did that? Would it help enhance flows in the creek? So in this example, you can see the insert on the right is where the wells are. Those are in red. The discharge location, just for this scenario, are the green dots. We just wanted to kind of get them into the creek at that location. And you can kind of see the graphic on the left talks about the total groundwater pumping in acre feet from 2020 up through 2070. So the baseline scenario, which I'll talk about here in a second, that just really assumes sort of current conditions today. We predict those out into the future 50 years. Those sort of pumping rates are shown in orange. So we're sort of referencing that as a baseline scenario. And then in this example, I call it PMA number. So project management action number, we can call it 1, 2, I don't know, it's a hypothetical. Let's just say when we predict when these dry periods are going to occur, we'll supplement that stream flow with groundwater. So this is the sort of the concept. So you can see when we do pump that additional water, you can see the blue lines are a little higher than the baseline because we're having to pump more water to sort of, enhance stream flow. So that's just the concept. So moving over to slide 7, what I'm showing here is 2 graphics. And what we're looking at is stream flow on the y-axis and then time on the x-axis. Again, we have the baseline projected out into 2070. Remember, all models are wrong, some are useful. And then what we look at, in this case, the baseline is in blue. Is in brown, and you can see like along Adobe Creek, at certain times of the year, when a drought occurs, that stream piece could go dry, right? That's what the model predicts. And then the thought is now let's enhance that with water that we're bringing in from upstream, from groundwater, put that into the creek. So there's a way that we could maintain water in the creek without having the creek go dry. So that's sort of the concept of Adobe Creek, and then also Kelsey Creek, we looked at it. Kelsey Creek, it didn't seem to be as sensitive, but again, it's just a model, it's just a concept. So I just wanted to kind of share that with you. And then the question that comes out of this is, okay, you're going to pump that additional groundwater. What impact does that have on the aquifer? We already know that there could be a potential benefit to the stream flows or the GDEs along the streams, but what would happen to the actual aquifer, which is the next graphic. So again, this is just looking at the cumulative change in storage projected out to 2070. Again, the baseline is in brown, and in this case, the PMA is in blue. So big picture, you don't see a big difference in the change in the cumulative change in storage when you implement this project. So again, I'll say it for the last time, all models are wrong, some are useful. This is where this modeling tool can be useful. So the thought would be, if this was a concept that folks are interested in, the next step would you do some kind of pilot test and you try to bring this on through grants and see if we could make it work. So again, I think this is probably one of the benefits, or I know is one of the benefits of the model. So I just wanted to kind of share that concept with you. And then as things kind of progress, and folks have other ideas, about frost protection, we can run these through the model and just kind of get a sense of, hey, does it make sense to take it to the next step, which would be developing a pilot test or sort of implementing some kind of study to see if it's feasible. So I just wanted to kind of share that with you. So I guess before I move on to the water budget section, is there any questions, general questions on the model update? Guy's got a question.
One, it's probably more of a comment, but early on in this process, I floated the idea that didn't seem to gain traction. The water from Scotts Valley during high groundwater times and or flood events conceivably could be transferred to the Big Valley Basin.
Right.
And I don't know if we go into streams or injection wells, that's a whole nother question. But the point to be aware of that in Scotts Valley, we have too much water many years in seasonally. And sometimes it goes on for months.
Sure.
And if that's a potential water source, then I guess, so that's the comment. My other question was, you talking about putting water into the creek like year long or
No, you can,
just at hitch time or
Yep.
something like that? Okay,
can-
seasonal.
you can do seasonal
Yeah.
enhancement.
Okay, so those are choices as you go along. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and I know I was kind of chastised originally about including Scotts Valley into the model domain. But, again, we feel like there is some communication between the two. So again, that's a project at some point. You could run through the model and see if it's worth taking it to the next step. So it's just another benefit of the model. So. Any other questions on the model? We're doing on time, Christine. Okay. What's that?
I'm doing well.
Okay, doing well. All right.
Actually, Peter has a comment.
Hey,
Peter, Peter,
Just
you
very
are
quick-
muted.
Just very quick question. Who knows how to use this? I take it this is kind of like a machine in a way that somebody can manipulate, put in some data, some assumptions or questions, and I mean, who's able to do that? And is it somebody in the local staff or water resources? Would they be able to do it?
Yeah, so the tech team's running it now. I can give you an example where we worked in another basin where there was a process to hand the model off to the county, the water district in this case, and then we implemented a training program where we actually trained the local entity to run the model. So that's an option, so we can look at that as an option. But right now it's Ludo from Scalmanini and Stantec that are running the model. But again, just because we developed it, but we're more than happy to share that because we think it's a valuable tool. There is a rather large learning curve on this thing. So we had some conversations with folks, there's short courses that folks can take. We're happy to come in and do a 2-day workshop. So we're happy, and the county owns it. So there's opportunities for others to get in there and look under the hood.
Thank you.
And I not to jump ahead to item 6, but I do want to stress that we do have an invite out there back to the modeling ad hoc to try to get together to kind of walk through some more of the details of this. So I think that there's an invite in your inbox for that, for those folks that were involved with that ad hoc group. So. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the water budget. And again, the model really, and you'll see kind of what goes into this water budget, is utilized to develop the water budget. And so what I'm going to walk through now is sort of a general 101 on what a water budget is. I feel pretty comfortable and confident you all know that. There's some water budget requirements under Sigma. So again, we're not doing this out of the goodness of our heart. We're doing it because we're required to do it. So under Sigma, we have to develop a historical water budget, a current water budget, and then also a future or predictive water budget. So those are required under Sigma. We're required to sort of put together tables and graphs to show that. I'll talk a little bit about sustainability and the overview of that. And then also we're required to develop a sustainable yield for the basin. And so I'll kind of walk through these for the next maybe half hour or so. So let me just kind of quickly go. Okay. Gotta move everybody out of the way here. I'm just gonna get rid of this actually. All right. So water budget 101. What we have to do is really we have to account for the total groundwater and surface water entering and leaving the basin. Again, it's required. That's what we have to do. That's really why we developed the model. There was some discussions initially, given the short time frame of developing this GSP. Could we even put together a model that quick? But we felt that the tech team working with the county felt like it was worth the investment initially, even if it's not perfect, the model's not perfect, because it can be built upon as we move forward. So again, we're going to utilize the model to really try to account for surface water and groundwater moving in, out of the basin. That's kind of the overview of the model, of the water budget, sorry. So in the basin's water budget, really we have two main components. We've got the surface water system, and then we've got the groundwater system, okay? In the surface water system, we actually divide that even further. We have a land surface system, and then we have a stream surface system. So the surface water system incorporates land surface, land usage, irrigation patterns on the surface, and then also the stream system. That's the components of the surface water budget, and then that's fed into the groundwater budget through recharge. And then the graphic on the right provides just sort of a general infographic on what water is entering and leaving the system. So water that's entering the system is generally sort of highlighted or outlined in blue. So you can see precipitation adds to the system. In some cases, we have surface water that inflows into the system. And we also have subsurface flows that sort of addressing or come into the system. And then once they go into the system, things move around, water's pumped out. Sometimes you have irrigation that adds more, recharge. So that's one component. Then you also have water that leaves the system, in our case, the basin. So we have water that could leave, through surface flows, subsurface flows, and then also evaporation. So again, that's sort of the concept of the water budget. And then as part of developing the model, we have to sort of check every one of those boxes and make sure we've got some physical value or data that we can incorporate and make these input files work into the model. So integrate into the model. So this is just a summary of what I mentioned previously. You can sort of see the table on your left is sort of sort of summarizes the inflows and the outflows. And then we've tried to highlight sort of the land surface system components, the stream system components, and the groundwater system components. So again, you can see there's lots of variables in here. Again, we do our best to kind of make sure that they're physically based or the data is coming from a reliable source. In some cases, we just don't have that information, but we'll look to close those data gaps as we sort of move through the GSP. So that's sort of a 101 on water budgets. So let's talk about the regulations, the groundwater sustainability regulations in regards to the water budget. So this is what's required. Each plan shall include a water budget for the basin that provides an accounting and assessment of the total annual volume of groundwater and surface water entering and leaving the basin, including historical, current, and projected water budget conditions, and the change in volume of water stored. Water budget information shall be reported in tabular and graphic form. So again, it's a heavy request, but we have to do it. So we're going to kind of walk through sort of how we utilize the model to actually extract all of this information. Again, we run the model, we calibrate the model, we try to get the simulated model results to match the observed. Once we feel pretty comfortable with that, then we recognize that that's matching. If it's calibrated, then we can extrapolate out the inputs and the outputs to feed into the required water budget components for the GSP. So again, from the regulations, this is what we have to do. Total surface water entering and leaving the basin by water source type. Inflow to the groundwater system by water source type. Outflow from the groundwater system by water use sector. The change in annual volume of groundwater storage between seasonal high conditions. If overdraft conditions occur, a quantification of the overdraft period during which water supply conditions approximate average conditions. The water year type associated with the annual supply and demand and changing groundwater stored, and then also an estimate of the sustainable yield for the subbasin. So those are required components from the GSP regs. Let's talk a little bit about water budget period. So I mentioned we have to do 3. So we have to do a historical water budget, which really represents sort of the long-term average historical hydrologic conditions. In the Sigma regs, they state that we have to extend it back a minimum of 10 years or as sufficient to calibrate and reduce the uncertainty. So remember the historical, a minimum going back a minimum of 10 years. the current water budget. So again, what is the current water budget? The regulations don't specify a current time period for the water budget. So we'll talk a little bit about how we address that for the current water budget. And then the predictive water budget. Again, it's required. It wants to know, estimate future conditions of supply and demand and aquifer responses. So again, this is kind of being required by Sigma, okay? So a couple other requirements. The water budget should be conducted on at least an annual time step. So again, once every year, we need to provide this information that I previously presented to DWR. And then the annual results that we talk about need to present it on a water year. So it's not an annual basis, it's a water year from October 1 through September 30th. So just mentioning that. And then also, even though we're required to develop an annual time step, which we've done, we actually have our water budgets on a monthly time step. So if we needed to, we could take the refined water budget or yearly time step and modify or break it out into monthly time steps. So we could see seasonally, how water levels change but water budget information changes. So we've sort of refined it at a monthly time step. Are there any questions sort of on the first couple of slides I've been kind of going through on regards to water budget? Okay, I'm gonna keep plugging away here. So I'm going to talk initially about the historical water budget. So again, according to the Sigma regulations, a minimum of 10 years is required to develop the historical water budget. Keep in mind, this historical water budget, as we develop it, we're utilizing the model. So we've got to calibrate the model. It would have been much easier just to calibrate the model for the last 10 years, but we decided, with the tech team and some of the GSPAC members and also just sort of our professional opinions, we actually took it back for 32 years. So we actually have a 32-year historical water budget. And we just feel like, it gives us more time to kind of better understand historically what's been going on, and also recognizing that we had pretty good data back to probably about 1985-ish, especially when it came to land use. So that's sort of our historical water budget period or analysis period. Just to kind of give folks sort of a snapshot of what's happened. This is the table that's on the bottom left there of your screen of, over the last 32 years, we know seasonally water levels change, climate changes. So we wanted to get a sense of, what percentage of the time has the base period been wet, above normal, below normal, dry, critical. So essentially we looked at sort of water years and based those on the annual precipitation. So again, a normal year would be sort of annual precipitation. So I don't have the annual on here, but that's okay. So again, you can see generally, if you kind of look at the 32-year period, we're looking at, generally 28% of the time between 98 and 2019, it's been above normal. A wet and above normal would be actually more than 50% of the time. It's been above normal or wet, and then below normal, it's been about 13% of the time, dry 25% of the time, and then it's been 3 years when it's been critically below the average. So again, just to kind of get a sense, recognizing that, we know precipitation changes annually. We wanted to incorporate that into the water budget. So I just wanted to kind of share that with you. It's not always wet, it's not always dry, it's just seasonal. And that's really important as we look forward into the future, because we know there's going to be dry periods and wet periods. So we've got to manage to those dry periods and wet periods if we need to. So a little bit about the historical information we use to develop the historical data for the baseline period or for the historical period. So climate data, we're utilizing a base characterization model. Hopefully you all got a chance to participate in the call we had a few weeks back, where we kind of talked a little bit about the BC model. Land use, we're utilizing DWR. We also subcontracted out with Land IQ to look at some of the 2018 data that they had developed for DWR. Groundwater pumping and municipal public services, we're doing our best to get that information either directly from the entity or from sort of the state water boards. And then it's the same with the in-stream diversion. So again, making the inputs that we're utilizing for this, they're being as transparent, because we try to take them from public sources if we can.
Hey, Eddie, Pat has a question.
Who has a question?
Pat Scully.
Oh, sorry, I thought Eddie had a question.
Yeah, Eddie.
No.
Could you go back one slide, Eddie?
This
So
one?
that, the mean annual precipitation, it looks like you've come up with somewhere around 33 or 34 inches. Where's that coming from? That seems pretty high for our basin. I don't know how.
Yeah, that's an average from 1950 to 2020.
So what area is that though?
I think that's from the PRISM data set from Oregon State. So I think it's, I have to go back and look at the source of it, but yeah. So we can share that with you, so.
Okay, just seems high, but maybe not.
Yeah.
Stan has a question.
Hey, and that's like, what is the black line?
This, let me see if I can show you. This line here, this line?
The one that goes down right about 1980, it's way low, and then it goes up and down. And I mean, what?
Yeah, that is actually just the cumulative precipitation. So if you get really, really wet years, then you're going to get more water added to the system that kind of carries over. So it's a cumulative precipitation through time.
And the other one, those bars, that's the wet and dry year.
That's just precipitation, yeah. So, you know, like, trying to get my mouse here, like this, you know, this was a pretty wet year. This was 85-ish, 60 inches of rain, you know? So then that's going to kind of carry over as you move through. So if you get a really wet period, it's going to kind of offset the cumulative offset as you move through. So anyway, that reference is actually in the TM where we got the preset.
What if the water's contaminated?
Yeah, I mean, if it is contaminated, it doesn't really impact the influence from precipitation to the system, right? It's just adding mass to the system. But we're just talking about water types. We're just talking about how much water is coming into the system. That makes sense?
I've got some statistics here from Big Valley. I'll share in a minute.
And Eddie, Sarah was just asking the black line is what, and I don't know if she asked it concurrently when Sky asked it, but just to clarify that that's cumulative precipitation.
Cumulative departure from the mean. That's what that means.
We need a short course on that. Eddie.
Yeah, I will.
I'm not an engineer.
It's documented in, yeah, but I agree.
I get it. Just want
So let me just, I gotta move this. Let me just see how to move this thing. Is there a way to move this out of the way?
The bar itself?
Yeah.
Yeah, future. Well, you had it for a second.
Yeah, I can't move it. I'm having a hard time. I'm gonna take this down here. Let's see what this does. Worse. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the historical water budget. So we mentioned we've got a land surface component, a surface water component, and a groundwater component. I'm going to kind of go through these. And again, this is just information that we have to extract out of the model and feed that into these tables that are required by DWR. So historical major inflows, precip, groundwater uptake, groundwater pumping. Some folks ask, well, wait a minute, why is groundwater uptake and inflow? Well, sometimes you're taking water out for irrigation, and you irrigate, sometimes that water ends up going back into the system. So the graphic on the upper right-hand side really looks at the volume. This is acre feet per year from 1988 through 2019 for these various components. So precip, septic, groundwater uptake, runoff, non-routed deliveries, evapotranspiration, pumping, and deep percolation. So these are components of the water budget that will feed into these tables that are required by DWR. And I'll explain what all this means. There's a slide at the end that kind of brings this home. So I just wanted to again explain that we're required to present all this information. So that's what we're kind of doing today, and then it'll be included in the GSP. So if you look at the table on the bottom right, what we're looking at here, again, for the historical period, these are the inflows that are sort of in the first 5 or 6 rows on the left, and then we have the outflows. So the average acre feet per year precipitation from 88 to 2019 is about 74,000 acre feet a year. So that's the precipitation that's coming into the system. Just as a sort of a fact check, the groundwater pumping is about 13,000 acre feet a year. So again, it just kind of gives you a sense of sort of how precip and really groundwater pumping is an easy one for folks to look at. So again, you can see it varies. All these components vary. but we just got sort of highlighting the average, again, specific to the land surface system. And these are budgets that are required as part of the SIGMA process. So, but again, this is just one component of the water budget, right? That's just the land surface piece. Let's just keep going here. Maybe. Now let's talk about the stream system. So again, the major inflows for the stream system, you've got stream inflow, you've got surface runoff, and then we've got stream gaining. And then the outflows, stream outflow and stream loss. So again, a similar graphic on the upper left-hand side, right-hand side, sorry, where we're looking at the different components that go into the water budget just for the stream system. So you can see we've got stream inflow, outflow, stream gaining, stream loss. We've got runoff, diversions. Actually, I don't see many diversions in there. So again, this is stream system wide for the entire Big Valley. So we could develop these water budgets, these stream systems just for Adobe Creek. All the creeks we could develop them for. But again, this is sort of aggregated for all the stream systems in the system. And then, Sarah, give me 2 seconds. Let me just get through this table and I'll ask you a question. Then the bottom right is a similar sort of summary table where we talk about the stream flow inflows, outflows. Are they gaining? In some cases they do gain, sometimes they lose. Just again, depending on the sort of the water period. We're looking at this on a monthly time step. And then you can sort of see the runoff averages and then the diversion. So again, a lot of information, but this is just again the stream system stream system component for the water budget. Sarah, you have a question?
Yeah, I guess two. So you're saying this is a monthly time step for the stream system, and where are you getting?
We have that. Yeah, this is what you're looking at here is annual, but the annual just adds up the monthly.
Okay, so this is annual data. And then diversion, and so we're not seeing that on the graph because you're saying it's such a small amount. How are you defining diversion?
Yeah, so it's what's taken out of the creeks. And so that's the information that's coming from the regional board. So we have that documented of what those volumes are.
So it's a statement of diversion and use reports submitted to the State Water Resources Control Board?
Correct, yes.
Okay, and you looked at all of them from, could you say the range of years?
88 to 2019.
Okay.
That's all the historical data set that we looked at. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and for every creek in the Big Valley Basin?
If it's available, we have it, yeah.
Okay.
I don't exactly understand how you can measure the water when,
sometimes you
like in 1985, there was so many people living here, and then in 2019, you have the pear people and the wine people and the commercial marijuana people.
Sure.
So doesn't the budget change?
Absolutely.
So how can you measure it?
So a lot of these values are extrapolated off of land use.
Extrapolated
Off of land use.
from where?
From land use. So we recognize, if there's vineyards here, we think that that's the amount of water they're going to need. We don't know because it's not measured.
I don't think it makes sense that you can measure something accurately when you don't know what the future is going to bring.
Sure. So let me respond. I agree, but we're forced to do that as part of developing the GSP, right? So how
What's a COP?
the groundwater sustainability plan.
Oh.
So we're required to do that. So we can say we don't know how to do it. Sorry, DWR, and then they're going to come knocking on our door, or we utilize the best science that we know of to extrapolate this information and utilize that. And I've quantified the error that's associated with a lot of this water budget information.
And Joan, he's going to talk about current and then predicted too. So you'll see how that plays out with some of the understanding of what goes forward.
But it's very difficult. I agree. It is very difficult.
How do you know how much rain is going to fall?
In the future,
Yes,
there's some climate models that have been developed by DWR.
and they know for sure how much rain is going to fall.
No, they have no idea.
No.
It's a best science sort of extrapolation. But if I came to you and I said, hey, we've got to come up with a predictive scenario to meet the GSP regulations, what's precipitation going to look like? And you have to do something. You have to come up with a number. You can't just say, I don't know. We've got to come up with something. There's some standard tools that DWR has made available to help look at that.
And tools can be useful.
Yeah. It's very complex. I agree, very complex.
Okay.
So it might be good to just repeat it this time. I don't know how far Jones followed this process, but this whole thing at the local level is happening in response to state requirements.
It's a state requirement that we
Yeah.
do this.
So we have a groundwater
figure
sustainability plan for
something
the
out.
Big Valley Basin, yeah. So a lot of what Eddie's talking about is things the state
And if we
requires.
don't, the state will.
Yep.
I think that's correct.
How does the
Somebody can
state
say that
know?
more succinctly, I'm sure.
How can the state predict it unless they have the measurements that have already taken place?
And that's why they lean on us, the local entities, to get the best data that we can. And it's similar to forecasts, right? So a weather person can let us know, oh, it's anticipated we'll get this amount of rainfall, or this is gonna be the forecast. But again, we don't have a crystal ball. I'm working on trying to read minds. I'm working on trying to figure all that out. It's not gonna happen anytime soon, but if we utilize the best available data, and that's why we have the expertise to be able to do that, we can try and prepare and get these models and try and anticipate what
And
could
people aren't
happen.
even telling us how many dry wells there are, really.
Sarah, did you have a question again?
No, sorry.
So I'm gonna move on. I'm about a third of the way and I'm getting an ugly look from Kristen. So I gotta pick up the pace a little bit.
An encouraging look,
Yeah.
an encouraging.
And again, all this information is summarized in section 2D of the GSP. So again, we're still on historical water budget. Now let's talk about the groundwater system. And so in the groundwater system, again, a similar graphic. This is sort of information that's sort of inflows, outflows that are required as part of the water budget, specifically the groundwater system. And then what I've also shown sort of a summary table at the bottom, where we're looking at sort of the average predicted stream leakage, subsurface inflows from sort of outside the subbasin. We've come up with an estimate for subsurface inflows from Scotts Valley, subsurface inflows from Clear Lake. Based on, there's not much there, which I think kind of correlates with some of the local perspective on sort of the connection. We know I feel there's a connection between the creek, between the aquifer system and Clear Lake, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of flux between that. Again, we got to look at the data gaps and try to identify those data gaps and look at ways to kind of maybe quantify that a little bit better. And then we've got deep percolation, which again really is sort of a fallout from irrigation. So folks irrigate, there's excess irrigation that actually ends up going down and percolating down and recharging the aquifer system. We've got the groundwater uptake, which is generally pumping, a combination of generally pumping, which in this case is agricultural pumping. We've estimated it about an average 10,700 acre feet a year. We've got the domestic, we've got some estimates on municipal pumping, but actually not estimates, those are reported values. So when you look at the ins versus the outs, on average, there's about a 200 acre foot per year addition to the groundwater system, right? So we're adding an additional 200 acre feet per year. But as we know, in this sort of California climate, when things are not good, in this case, the minimum, we're seeing a deficit of 7,400 acre feet. When things are wet and there's a lot of rain and precip, we're seeing a surplus of 10,700 acre feet a year. So again, it sort of fluctuates. And of course, there's sort of an average, or we can look at sort of what the standard deviation of that would look like. But generally, from 1988 through 2019, there's been about 6,000 acre feet of cumulative addition to storage through that 32-year period.
Eddie, we have two questions.
Sure.
Scott has a question in the chat. How did you determine the contribution from Scotts Valley?
Sure. So what we've done is we've created the model domain, which includes Scotts Valley and Big Valley, and then we calibrate the model, Scotts Valley, Big Valley, and then the water budget fluxes, in this case, across that are extrapolated out of the model. So the idea is if we know we've got modeled water levels, surface water stream flows out of Scotts Valley, and the same in Big Valley, where does that water go? In some cases, it has to cross that sub-basin boundary. So in this case, it's not very much, but that's how we came up with it. Again, I think, the question is there a hydraulic connection there? I think the hope is we can sort of tease some of that information out of the AEM data. So I don't know if that addresses your question, Scott. But.
And then Eddie, Sarah asked, can you confirm if the diversions on the stream system are based only on the report submitted to the State Water Resources Control Board, or if any of that is extrapolated?
I'd have to talk to Nick about it, see how he looked at it, but it's all documented in the TM. So.
And Peter has his hands up. Peter, you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question about water falling on Mount Conocta, precipitation on Mount Conocta, whether that contributes to the groundwater in Big Valley. If so, is it in one of these categories? What can you say about that?
Yep, it's the subsurface inflow from hillsides. That's where that's coming from. So anything outside of the basin, we're using the BOC model, the watershed model to sort of funnel that water. Where does it go? It comes into Big Valley. That's where that number is coming from. So it's looking at that.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, so I got to kind of pick up the pace a little bit here, but just a quick summary on the historical water budget.
I don't think, you're gonna go slow. This is important.
Okay, well, if you give me some dirty looks, let me know. So just a summary really on the water budget. So really the average annual storage change has been about 200 acre feet per year. So that's an increase. The cumulative change in storage over the last 32 years has been about 600 acre feet. The annual storage change ranges from a minus 7,400 acre feet to an increase of 10,700 acre feet a year. Again, it just depends on the year, on the year, wet versus dry. That's what sort of summarized in the next bullet. Storage increases in wet years, decreases in dry years. We don't believe there's been any historical overdraft conditions in this basin based on the historical water budget. And then, decrease in storage does occur during the dry years because we're actually having to remove, we pump more groundwater essentially. So that's kind of what we're seeing. So that's sort of a general summary of the historical water budget. And so now what I'm going to do is move to the current water budget. So again, this is required, but there's no real regulations on when we pick, what time period we pick for a current water budget. So what we did was we actually evaluated water budgets for several periods. We looked at the recent 2019 only, a 2018 only. We looked at the recent 4 years from 2016 to 2019. We looked at the recent 6 years from 2014 to 2019. And then we looked at the recent 10 years from 2010 to 2019. And again, they vary widely, just really based on precipitation. So again, we have to make a decision on what the current water budget looks like. So what we chose to do was we looked at a recent 6 year period from 14 to 19. And the justification for that really is it includes 2 wet years, 2 above normal years, a dry year, and a critically year. So it sort of reflects what we thought was sort of a current water condition. We're not cherry picking a wet period. We're not cherry picking a dry period. We're trying to pick something that's in the middle. So we felt like it was reasonable of sort of recent conditions. So that's kind of what we've done, and that's what I'm going to walk you through now on the current water budget. So again, it's very similar graphics. You can see we're looking at the land surface system. If you kind of look at the table on your right, on the upper right-hand corner, you can kind of see we've got the water budgets. Again, this is for the land surface. We've actually summarized it for the last 10, 6, 4, 1 year in 18 and 1 in 19. And then also you can kind of see, there's various inflows and outflows, but then you can sort of see what the total flows are in the land surface system. They're sort of summarized at the bottom of the table. And again, this is just the land surface system, which then is added to the surface water system and the groundwater system to get an overall water budget from the groundwater system. Here's, I guess, this sort of addresses one question on the rainfall piece. It looks like annual rainfall in 18 was 23.6 inches, and then in 2019 it was 53.3 inches. So we are utilizing that information into the water budgets. So again, that's the land surface system water budget. Similar graphic now, we're looking at the stream system. So we've got the inflows, the outflows, and then we have, again, the recent 10 years, 6 years, 4 years, 1 year for 18 and 1 year for 19. So again, you can see the stream flow systems, they vary, just again, based on sort of the really precipitations what driving the stream system. But we're sort of looking at that 2014 to 2019 sort of as an average current water budget period. The groundwater system, so again, you know, it used to be, you'd have two trains of thought. You'd have folks that would just look at the surface water system and didn't care about the groundwater system. And you had folks that looked at the groundwater system and didn't look at the surface water system. But hopefully it's very clear that this is all connected. And so you really have to look at this as sort of one whole system. They sometimes call it one water now. So it's not just surface water, not with groundwater, but because, you know, as you can see that the different variables, components really factor or impact, in this case, this change in storage, which is what we have to identify through Sigma. So for the current water budget, again, this is looking at the groundwater system, which is reflective of all the surface stream flows, you know, precipitation. So it kind of gives you a sense of the health of the system. And again, you can see if you look at the table on the upper right, look at the bottom of the table, you kind of look at what the average annual groundwater storage change is. That's the number we have to provide to DWR. So for the last 10 years, it's been an addition of about 1,100 acre feet. The 6-year period, which we feel like reflects sort of the high and the low periods, dry and wet, it's about 1,600 acre feet. On average, it's been added to the system. You can see if you just sort of cherry picked a drought period, 2018, you show a deficit of 5,300. But then if you cherry picked a sort of a wet period, more wet period, you'd be at 6,300. So again, we feel like the 6-year period is representative of wet and dry periods. So on average, for the current water budget, we're seeing about 1,600 acre feet a year of groundwater, an increase in groundwater storage. According to the model, and I won't make you all repeat back to me, but all models are wrong, but some are useful. So just kind of keep that in mind as we move forward.
Scott has a question for you, Eddie.
Yes, sir.
So what would be the explanation for that groundwater storage gain? Is that about pear orchard removal, or do we have theories about that? Or?
Precipitation is one piece. Land use could factor into it. We can dive into those details. We can look at it, you know, like I said, monthly. So we can figure out what is the most sensitive. But what we're seeing is precipitation.
I think this is like an important part of this is, you know, why is it going up? You know,
right?
I'm not missing the point here.
No,
okay,
you are.
Great, thank you.
But again, you have to recognize like the error in this, and so that's what brings us back to the sustainable management criteria, which is actually observed water levels, water quality. That's really, really important. This is sort of just, I mean, there's a lot of error that's sort of affiliated with this. You know, the error in these model runs could be 25%.
But the well monitoring supports doesn't contradict those numbers.
It does not.
Okay, that's an important part too, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Got about 15-20 minutes.
All right. I'm going to talk about the projected water budget. So again, for the projected water budget, what we have to do, according to Sigma, is estimate the 50-year future supply, demand, and aquifer conditions, right? So we have to look at a out into the future 50 years, but we're actually going to utilize 50 years of previous data. So we're going to take the previous data and we're going to kind of roll that out into the future and run that out into the future and just see what happens as we move through it. So we've got 3 scenarios we looked at. We've got a baseline, which essentially used 1969 through 2019 climate data, and we kind of extrapolated that out into from 2020 to 2070. And then we used historical precipitation, historical surface water flows, and then also historical groundwater pumping. So we're not really looking at the impacts of potential climate change in this scenario. We just, again, this is what's required. That's what we're doing. But what we've also done is we wanted to incorporate a climate change scenario. So I think somebody had asked previously, how do you predict what's going to happen into the future? Well, there's some models that have been developed by DWR and other NASA, actually, some of them. And so we utilized some of those models and sort of looked at these scenarios B and C, utilizing these climate models. So essentially what they've done is they've tried to estimate or project out what precipitation, what surface water flows would look like out into the future. And they've sort of looked at one where it was an extremely wet period out 50 years. And they've also looked at one that's extremely dry periods. Again, we don't know what it's going to look like, but we just felt like it gives us sort of a good range to look at. So keep this in mind. Scenario A is essentially baseline, no changes, just projecting it out into the future. B and C actually incorporate a climate scenario. B is more of a wet period that we're looking at in the future. And scenario C is more of a dry period.
Eddie, Sarah had asked for clarification. She said, did you say the error in these models is 25%?
Yeah, so Sarah, let me show, I have a slide at the very end that kind of sort of estimates what we feel like the model errors are for each one of these components. So just let me, I'll present that here in a second. So, because again, it's very important to sort of make sure folks understand this. Is that okay? Your thumbs up.
Thank you.
So again, this is the projected scenario. So what we're looking at here is projecting the water budget. We run the model out to 2070. You can see the insert on the upper right sort of shows the various components that are utilized to develop that. And then we've got a summary table at the bottom. Let me just kind of give you a highlight of what we're seeing. So into the future, groundwater pumping actually would go up by about 12%. Some of that's related to land use. So we have to increase municipal use a little bit. That's what we kind of done. And then the general changes in the other water budget components seem to be about the same as the current water budget projection, except for 33% more stream flow diversion. So again, this is just what's needed to meet the demand based on sort of a future scenario. Let me just kind of move to, this is the projected scenario, the groundwater system budget. I think this kind of really gives a better sort of picture of where things are on the change in storage, which is the question we have to address as part of the plan. So this is looking at the projected scenario where we're looking at, really not making many changes to land use. So we're just kind of running it out into the future. So you can see if we kind of maintain the status quo today out through 2070, you can kind of see that we probably see a cumulative change in storage. This is again, depending on the year, an average would be about 0, but in some cases we would see a deficit of about 8,400. In some cases we see an increase of about 10,600. So again, it's very similar to the current and historical water budget, being that we don't think we'll see much changes, and we think generally water levels would be somewhat similar today as they would be in 2070 as they would be today if there was not any substantial changes to land use. Okay, that's kind of what we're showing here. So we keep doing what we're doing. We don't think we'll see any changes out in 2070. So this is just sort of a summary. So again, average, generally, we don't see any changes in storage on the scenario A. We do see, a deficit of about 2,200 acre feet, which is more than the historical, the cumulative storage change. But annually, we don't really see much of a change. And it varies just really strictly based on precipitation. We're feeling that we don't see projected overdraft conditions if things kind of are maintained today and the climate's the way it is today, which we don't know. So let me move through here because I want to get to this one. So now we're going to look at essentially a similar scenario. It's a projected scenario, but we're actually going to increase the precipitation a little bit. Again, this is a climate model that was developed by DWR. So the idea is we're going to add a bit more water into the system. It's going to come earlier in the year. So if that was the case, which again, we don't know what's going to happen, just to kind of compare apples to apples, if we have more water in the system, then, the change in storage is on average about the same. We do see sort of less of a swing because we're adding more water, less of a addition to the system, more of an addition to the system because we're adding more water. But the cumulative groundwater storage change, which kind of makes sense, is we're putting more, it's wetter, it's predicted to be wetter, then we're going to add more water to the system. So the cumulative change over that 50-year period is about 1,500 acre feet a year. So again, that's just an extreme scenario, assuming we're going to have wetter conditions as we move out into the future. Is that going to happen? We don't know, but I just wanted to kind of share that. Something I do want to point out, if I can get my mouse back here. This I should have brought this up earlier. See this black line you brought it up earlier, Sky. This is sort of the cumulative change in storage. So really, what you want this line to sort of be around 0. So we know in some periods it's going to be wet. Some periods it's going to be dry, so it's going to drop below this sort of annual storage change. But ideally, we want this to be a flat line, which it is, which is a good thing. I can tell you some folks in the San Joaquin Valley would really kill to be in the sort of the conditions that you have in this basin today. So let me just show you a quick extreme case. So again, in this case, we're going to say it's gonna be much drier in the next 50 years. Okay, so let's run through a similar scenario. I'm just gonna quickly go to the groundwater system budget because it includes all the other components. Again, if you look at the average table at the bottom, the groundwater storage annual change could be as much as minus 300 acre feet per year if conditions get dry, that match sort of the scenario we ran. So a cumulative change would be a minus 15,200 acre feet per year. And you can kind of see that reflected in the cumulative change. Like, this is not a good place to be. Let me just show you. This is not a good, like, this is pretty good, but see this decrease, this downward trend, this is not good. We don't want to be there. So, but again, this is just a model scenario. So this is what would happen if we had, you know, drier periods as we move through into the future. So we can kind of, you know, bracket our analysis. We've got sort of our historical, we've got our current, we've got a projected based on sort of current conditions today, moved on into the future. And we've got two extreme scenarios where we say, well, if things are going to be wetter, what's it going to look like? If things are going to be drier, what's it going to look like? Again, all model results, you know, that's what I'm going to say.
Pat has a question for you.
Yes, Pat.
Andy, can you ballpark how much drier this scenario is than what we've seen?
I can. I don't. Let's see if I can see. I can go to precip. Let me just see if I got this. 7,500. Precip. Give me a sec. 7,500. 50%. 50% drier than it is. Yeah, 50% drier than it is today.
Okay, thank you.
Than today.
Than today.
So we're on a record dry year now.
Well, I mean, like through the current average. So
Going
like
back some
the
numbers.
6 year period. So it's pretty extreme, is what I'm saying. So,
Follow up, Eddie.
yeah. Oh,
So you're showing us that, I know this increase in storage, and probably that you've already told us this, but how much more room is there in the aquifer to store water? I mean, if we wanted to maximize the storage in the aquifer, how much can we put in there getting ready for one of these long dry periods?
I don't have the number, but we can get that out of the water.
But that's an important idea too, right?
Exactly.
My guess is we can't store enough to get ready for some scenario like that.
In some cases you can.
Oh, that's encouraging. Yeah.
So let me just kind of go through some of the uncertainties, because again, we don't have a crystal ball. We know the model's not perfect. In some cases, it's the input values that we have put into the model that are not perfect. So you can kind of see what we've tried to do here is we've identified the water budget components. We've estimated the data source on where those numbers come from. And then we've tried to estimate the uncertainty. And then we sort of given a description of the uncertainty. So I think at some point, well, this is actually included in the model TM, but also we'll obviously share these slides with you. So going back to what we were talking about, Sarah, you can kind of see that the error for that groundwater storage number could be 50 to 30%. And it's not a function necessarily of the model's ability, it's just the inputs that are utilized in the model. Does that address your question?
Yes, and I hope that we're able to see the data that was fully used for the model.
Yeah. So anyway, so there's error associated with it. So let's just talk a little bit about recognizing the error. That's why the sustainability indicators, right? The 5 of the 6 that are applicable in the basin are really important, because those are measured values. So it's one thing to do the analysis and look at the water budgets, recognizing there could be anywhere from 15 to 30% error on either side. That's why we want to utilize the water levels, the water quality, try to understand, you know, the subsidence obviously is not an issue, but that's the key metric that's going to be utilized to sort of develop the sustainability sort of plan and keep track of sustainability. We know we can update the model when new information comes into it, but we really can't depend on a model to sort of help us understand the overall sustainability or develop metrics for sustainability. So that's why we developed these. That's why we developed the MOs and the MTs for 5 of the 6 sort of deadly sins. That's why it's really, really important. So one other couple of slides I have here, sustainable yield. So again, we're required to come up with a sustainable yield number. And so in this case, the definition of sustainable yield, maximum quantity of water calculated over a base period representative of a long-term condition in the basin and includes any temporary surplus that can be withdrawn annually from the groundwater supply without causing an undesirable result. So big picture, you can't spend more money than you're putting in the bank, right? That's kind of what they want us to develop. And they want to know what that number is. So they require that the GSP quantify the sustainable yield of the basin. The regulations don't specify the methodology to estimate the yield. But in our case, we're looking at the historical and projected model results to help to help estimate a yield. So that's kind of what our approach was. So let me explain this again. You've seen most of this information, but just kind of bringing your attention to the very bottom slide, where we're presenting essentially the historical water budget, 98 to 2019, the projected water budget for scenarios A, B, and C. And we're looking at the annual groundwater storage change. So this is important because this factors in to how much we think we can pump from the basin based on these inputs. So if we're seeing essentially an annual groundwater increase of 200 acre feet a year, an oversimplified view could be, well, you could pump another 200 acre feet per year, right? That's the concept. But if you're in a deficit already, which could happen if we agree with what's predicted out of scenario C, which is sort of these dry extreme conditions, we have a deficit of 300 acre feet a year. So you'd have to curtail pumping to make that, because at the end of the day, we want this storage number to be about zero, and averaged over sort of a historical period, over a certain period. So let me explain this slide to you. So what we did here, when we have to estimate a yield, okay, so what we're looking at here is estimating sustainable yield. We actually utilize the most extreme scenario. So assuming it's going to be 50% drier in the future, let's go with that. And so then what we're looking at here is we know the total groundwater extraction that would be predicted in the scenario C would be 29,300 acre feet per year, right? But we know that results in a deficit of 300 acre feet per year. So we take the 29,300, subtract the 300, we're looking at about 2,900 acre feet per year, right? So we're estimating that the sort of sustainable yield of the basin could be 2,900 acre feet per year, plus recognizing the uncertainty in the model. We recognize it was from 15 to 20 to 30%. That's assumed 25%. So the sustainable yield in the basin could vary from 21,750 acre feet to 36,250 acre feet per year. Again, this is a number that's required to include in the plan. So that's sort of what our assumptions have been on developing that. So just to kind of give you sort of a sense of how that fits into some others. So this is sort of the number we estimated was 2,900 acre feet per year. We sort of included sort of an error based on the models, sort of inputs that go into it. So we're estimating it's anywhere from 22,000 to 36,000 acre feet per year. For comparison purposes, from DWR, from their Bulletin 118, not the most recent one, they're estimating about 60,000 acre feet per year. So we're significantly less than what they were estimating. But again, there's lots of limitations with that. But again, that's a number we have to kind of put into the plan. My understanding is we're not going to be judged on that number. Really, what we're judged on is the MOs and MTs from our monitoring network. So again, that's the number we have to develop. So I think with that, I don't know how we're doing on time, Christine, and I know there was a lot to talk about, but again, this information is summarized and presented in section 2D, and I think with that.
Of what? Section 2B of what?
2D of the groundwater sustainability plan. Okay. Great time.
Yeah, did you want to, we were just really quickly going to go over the fact, but you already said it about the model development and the water budget planning ad hocs, that those were in process. That's it.
Yeah, I think we're trying to schedule, I think there's an invite out there, so folks, if they want to, talk, then that's fine. And also, we're under a lot of pressure, but I also understand there's a lot of information I presented. There's a lot of information in the plan. If folks wanted to have sort of individual meetings to talk about some of this water budget stuff, I'm more than happy to make time to make that happen per sort of the ad hoc rules and regulations or whatever is involved, the Brown Act. But again, I just want folks to understand, not a magic crystal ball, all models are wrong, some are useful. And that's very important for folks to understand.
Sarah has her hand up.
Yes, Sarah.
Hi, thanks. I just wanted you to go a little bit more into when you say that we're significantly less than the bulletin 118 in terms of storage. What is that implying then? If you can just provide some more context for that.
So if you had asked DWR when they had developed their initial, the bulletin 118, when they estimated the storage for the Big Valley subbasin, they had estimated it at 60,000 acre feet per year. And we're saying it's, 30,000 acre feet per year. So it's a lot less. The yield is a lot less than what DWR had originally estimated.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
And again, their estimates, they didn't use a model to estimate it. So I think it was an oversimplification where they probably utilized changes in water levels and then sort of multiplied that by an average thickness of the aquifer. So I would feel pretty comfortable and confident that our numbers are more realistic than those ones that are in bulletin 118. Some folks might not like to hear that, but anyway. Okay, well, thank you.
We can take a break until about, let's say 12:55. We'll leave back and we'll go over just a couple other things, do some public comment period and wrap it up.
Yeah, I'd like to know, the sustainability plan, what it is and what it is meant to do, so that we plan better, because we've used up a lot of water already, and we're still welcoming developers to use up more.
Yeah, I mean,
On this board.
my understanding.
What is
Eddie,
the
I wanna be able to give
sustainability
you-
plan gonna make us do?
Joan, I want to be able to give Eddie a break, so
Oh, yeah.
if you need to take a break, so we're in a break period, and we'll come back, we'll answer questions.
Yes,
for sure.
yeah, I'm sorry.
No, you're totally fine. No, you're totally
You're
fine.
I mean, people like me are gonna have to understand this in order to vote for it.
So Eddie and Christy, if you guys need to use the restroom, you know where it's at, right?
Yeah.
I don't mean to knock you or anything. I
No,
just
no.
wanna. And there are 850,000 pages of papers filed in this one lawsuit. And the judge said, I'm not gonna read 850,000 pages. Yeah, you hand in 5 pages on the 19th, you hand in the answer on December 10th. I'll read both of those. And that's a judge who's supposed to be intelligent. I'm not even supposed to be intelligent. I'm just supposed to read. I do read. But, and you're saying that the groundwater use in Lake County has gone down.
Correct. Based on what information, groundwater usage.
You mean Big Valley?
Big Valley,
Yeah.
Big Valley. Yeah.
Just, sorry to interrupt. Okay.
The Big Valley has gone drastically reduced.
They're, in other words, people in that Big Valley are not using up their groundwater.
Compared to 10 years ago, it's a lot. I mean, it's like,
According, and the measurements, where are you getting the measurements?
again, we're extrapolating out of land use data mostly.
Where?
Land use, so we know there's so many acres of pears in the subbasin. You know, how many, there's so many acres of vineyards in the subbasin, so we can extrapolate what the usage is to meet the demand for those crops.
Well,
Well,
there's state analysis and, you know,
okay.
But I mean, what else can we do? We have no, you know, they're not metered, so we can't do that.
I think it's important, John, I don't know if you know, there's a well monitoring program going on. Are you
I
familiar with that at
understand,
all? Okay,
yeah.
because it's really extensive, and then in Big Valley, it's been stepped up since this thing came into being. So it's a reality check on all these numbers. That's the more lean to get. They're actually going out and looking at these wells and see how much water's in there. And it's a little bit complicated, but that's the reality check to see if these numbers are anywhere near right. Is that a fair statement?
How many of the wells have been measured
And
that are
Joan-
existing in the
Joan-
Valley?
Joan, just 1 second. We do have the time. We do have some time at the end for public comment. I want to make sure everyone's engaged in those public comments. So I'm going to pause right here. Sarah, I do see your hand raised. Do you have a question?
It's really more part of that conversation that's happening. So if it's gonna happen a little bit at the end, I'm fine.
Yeah, let's go ahead because I don't want folks to miss out on that conversation. So let's go ahead and pick that back up during public comment period. So those folks that are returning, thank you for coming back after the break. Glad we didn't lose you. If you could please turn your screen on. I'm gonna go ahead and pass it over to Ibrahim, who is gonna outline the next steps for GSP development. And Ibrahim, you are ready. Go ahead and take it away.
and as Ibrahim hops on there, I just want to say, David, we will get to your question that you put up there.
Thank you.
Maybe as we wait for Ibrahim, maybe Eddie, do you want to address, David Weiss asked, does the GSPAC have any influence over the assumptions used in the predictive model scenarios? If so, when and in what forum would discussion of those parameters and assumptions take place?
Yes, so we did request, and we've had some conversations with individuals, GSPAC members on really the question, you know, the climate predictions. If you got some ideas on what the climate's gonna look like in 50 years from now, I would value that, but I think for us, it's more on the land use. How do you envision land use looking like in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years in the basin? That's where we needed help. We've had some conversations with the Farm Bureau, but we need help with that, because right now what we're assuming is, you know, very little growth. So, but yeah, I mean, if you want to send me an email, I'll set up a call with you. We can walk through some more of your questions in detail, if that would help. So but yes.
My reason for ask, as I listened to the report you just gave, Eddie, it seems to me that in the interest of this basin, regardless of what, you know, side of the table you're sitting on, it seems to me that the more conservative we can be in forecasting in each of those scenarios, meaning by more conservative, I mean by having less available, less available water in each of those scenarios, the better we stand as a basin in protecting the and maintaining that water in this basin. I'm worried, just like I'm worried about my own wells and the loss of the ability to use the groundwater that's here. I worry about the basin, being tapped by other parts of the state to provide groundwater to areas that are, or to supplement water to other areas that are, less fortunate than we are. That's the point.
Yeah, that's, if you're, send me an email, let's have a conversation, we can talk through it.
Okay. Thank you.
Ibrahim, are you back with us yet? You're on line item number 7, agenda item number 7. Might be having some technical difficulties.
I can try to wing it.
And I can defer to Marina, who did hers from last night, where she's just gonna kind of give us a quick glimpse of what happens from here, where we're at, where we're going.
What about 6.2?
Eddie did that.
Financing?
The implementation and financing, no, those are just saying that those 2 meetings will take place. That was just pointing out that those 2
Okay,
are in play and will be taking place.
got it.
There's been a request sent out to the ad hoc.
Yep. Correct. And all GSPAC members are invited to attend that, and it will be a public meeting, Sky, so.
And then you can also find the meeting, once that is scheduled, you can find all of those meeting materials on the Water Resources website as well, with the regular Big Valley Groundwater Zoom invite that we've been doing as well. And if that's in person, then we'll share that information as well. It'll probably take place again, hybrid format, but I'll get to that at the next item that I have in terms of next meetings. But I do see Ibrahim is back, so we're gonna go ahead and pass it over to Ibrahim. If you could please touch on item 7, Ibrahim, for outlining of next steps for GSP development and GSP adoption process and submission. Oh, you're on mute. I said Zoom.
I know.
Knew it. Hello, guys. So we are pretty close to the finish line here. So the I think mentioned earlier, the public comments on the draft GSP is due December 3rd, and then just keep December 3rd in your mind, and then the very end is January 31st, where we have to upload the GSP you submit to DWR. The submittal process itself, I think Eddie can tell you, it takes few days, probably close to 5-6 days, because we need to upload not just the GSP document, but all of the model files, all of the electronic files, all of the data sources that has been used in the GSP, because DWR will also want to do like an independent verification of everything we've done. So right now we are hoping to get the GSP adopted by the Lake County Board in the second week in January. So that's kind of the big milestone we're working towards. So going back to December 3rd, we have our next GSPAC meeting is the December 17th. And so for the December 17th meeting, that will be a big day for our GSPAC, because hopefully by then, by that meeting, we would like the GSPAC to provide a full recommendation that the board, the GSA board or the Lake County Board adopt the GSP. And so that's kind of why it's critical for this public review process to get the input. As Christy mentioned prior to or just around the 17th of December, probably a couple days ahead of it, we will have a public meeting. And that public meeting would be just focused about the adoption process, giving people heads up about how the adoption process is going to work, what opportunity they have to provide input. So after our last GSPAC meeting for this year on December 17th, then we will be planning to have a workshop presentation to the Lake County Board, which will include an official public hearing. So that public hearing is required as part of the GSP process. So again, so the sequence is December 3rd, we're going to close public comments. Will take about 2 weeks to compile public comments. Then we will meet with you on the 17th to kind of talk about if there is any major changes to the public draft. There'll always be some improvement, but we'll talk about if there's any major changes to the SMCs or recommendation or to findings. And then based on that, we'll hope to get feedback from you, an official recommendation for the GSA to adopt the GSP. Around the 17th itself, we would have a public meeting to kind of again lay out the ground in terms of inform the public about the adoption that's coming up and how the process will work. Probably the first week of January, because of the holidays, we will have a public hearing and a workshop to the board, just kind of going again a high-level presentation about what the plan include, what it says, what the implication is, and then open it for an official public hearing where the public can, or any one of you or the public can provide their comments to the board, which the board then will take into advisement. The second week of January, probably the regular board meeting, we will have an agenda on the board to adopt the GSP. At that meeting, when the board adopt the GSP, the board could provide additional direction to the staff in terms of accept the GSP as is, or modify this, or modify that, or incorporate this to address some of the public hearings. And then that goes back to staff, who have about a couple of weeks to wrap up everything and submit the official GSP to DWR before the end of January. We will also planning to have another GSPAC meeting on the I think it's 28th or on the 20th. Sorry, the last week in January. That GSPAC meeting, again, will have a little bit of celebration, but the most important piece of that meeting is looking forward. Because by end of January, the charter for this GSPAC will expire. And so we need to start thinking about rechartering the GSPAC meeting, the GSPAC body itself going forward. So it kind of have because it have an important role in the implementation and monitoring of the GSP. All of this is going. We also have, I think Eddie mentioned this, but we also will have to meet the very first requirement under the GSP, which is the annual report. So the annual report is due April, so 3 months later. So that's mean come January, the county and staff should be will be thinking immediately about getting the annual report out to describe the basic condition for the year ending through 2021. Did I see any questions, Christy?
No, I don't see it.
Okay, I saw something flash on my screen.
I do want to piggyback though. Thank you, Ibrahim, for that update. And I just want to encourage folks, if you're not already, I believe pretty much everyone in this discussion today is signed up for the listserv. We will be sending that tentative schedule to everyone so they have that in their email. They can keep those dates on their radar. But again, these are all public meetings. So when they do go before the board, you'll have those agendas. We'll give proper notification to the listserv so everyone can keep those upcoming meetings and those key dates on their radar, and they can have those in a handy dandy place. So encourage folks to sign up for our listserv. Give us a call if you need assistance in signing up for that listserv. But all that information is on the Water Resources website, and we can also walk you through that. So real quick, any questions of Ibrahim's update before we move over into our public comment period? No, we're good. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and open it up for about 10 to 15 minutes of public comment period. I know, Sarah, you had listed some things in the chat, so I want to give you the opportunity to highlight any of those. And then also from the previous discussion that we started as folks were coming back into the room, I know, Sarah, you had some additional questions on that, and Joe, I believe you did too. So right now I'm going to pass it over to Sarah if you would like to highlight anything that you listed in the chat, please.
Thanks, Marina. Yeah, I put those items in there for the benefit of public that are involved. But there are, you know, the way that we're looking at it, of course, at Big Valley is, you know, we want to be able to use groundwater for our beneficial uses, just like everybody else. And but we also have the added interest and concern about the there being enough water in the creeks at the time that the Clear Lake Hitch are spawning. And because of just past experiences of the creeks going dry before the hitch can, the fry can make it fully down back to the lake after they've hatched. And that recruitment is highly, quite likely one of the things that is impacting the extremely low numbers of the Clear Lake Hitch. We're very involved in this larger question of groundwater sustainability. And so I just put a couple things on there about, you know, there's a lot of assumptions about water use, and it's just important to know that, you know, for surface water use, the surface water users of the creeks need to submit statements of diversion and use reports to the State Water Resources Control Board. Maybe they've renamed the reports. That's certainly the ones I've looked at. And they estimate the use, and the State Water Resources Control Board doesn't always check up on these things, and they certainly don't add up all the use to see if there's enough water in the creeks and there's overdraft. So those are just estimated surface water use. It's the same with groundwater pumping. That's not measured. There's no meters on these wells. So, you know, we're best guess about that one. There's also just no granular data about in particular areas around the creeks, what kind of agricultural crops are there and what their water use is. And then we also know from our own projects that there are wells that do not appear to be counted in any sort of list of the county or the states. And so we've got some unknowns there. And it all boils down to there's you know, enough unknowns that, you know, there are these potential inaccuracies of up to 25%, as was stated. And that means a lot when you're looking at dry years and maybe even normal years when it comes to the Clear Lake Hitch, who need, you know, if they have one bad year or two bad years, that could be the end of them. And we're at the point now where the biologist for Clear Lake has stated that we will be losing the Clear Lake Hitch within 5 years if there aren't some drastic changes made. So just wanted to bring up, you know, we have our own, we are collecting data in the creeks and in the wells in the Big Valley Basin in some areas, as everyone knows. And it's, we're just putting data out there, certainly not changing any numbers, if anybody's thinking that. It's all about just, you know, being able to monitor and see where things are at. So just wanted to to state that there's assumptions, and we don't want those assumptions to impact a very important native species, since we've already lost many native species under the management of everybody. So we don't want that to happen to the Clear Lake hitch or to anything else that we care about. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. I see Peter Windrum, you have your hand up. And you're on mute, Peter. Oh, there you go.
Thank you very, very much. I've just listened, of course, to what Sarah has said, and I have to keep coming back to some things that are terribly false in those statements. That and even though it's repeated time after time, that equating hitch stranding as necessarily related to groundwater pumping is false, flatly false. And in that, fry stranding is also a natural phenomenon. And because hitch can't predict how quickly a stream is going to dry because of lack of rainfall upstream. And so in a state of nature, hitch get stranded, or fry get stranded, and eggs are destroyed. It's because of that high risk that females have, in an evolutionary sense, have up to 60,000 eggs. If you could imagine, if you take a couple of thousand female hitch, well, then you get to staggering numbers, and it's because of that high mortality. There are situations in which pumping can contribute to that, but it's not a straight equation. It's not because every time hitch are stranded that it's because of groundwater pumping. That will be repeated time after time after time. It's false. For example, stranding occurred on Adobe Creek above the Bell Hill Road that was talked about greatly a couple of years ago. There's no groundwater pumping. There's no pumps. The pumping that occurs, it was no pumping at the time. So you have to be very specific. If in an instance of fry stranding, you have to ask the question, a whole bunch of questions. Where are pumps relative to that? Was there any pumping, since the pumping occurs at all? So yeah, and those are just a few of the questions. So have to be really careful. Do we want fry stranded? No. Do we want to try to rescue them? Yes. Second thing is that the expert did not say that hitch would be gone in less than 5 years. That isn't what he said. What he said is, if on this continuing trajectory, there's no juvenile survival greater than what's been going on most recently, that yes, that would happen. However, we do know that hitch can spawn in the streams. We know that hitch populations fluctuate enormously from the biologists who have studied that. We've known that there are creeks like Kelsey Creek that some years have no hitch in them, having nothing to do with groundwater pumping at all, or even for a lack of water. So anyway, it's a complex subject, and I am just so always disturbed when false, overstated data, quote unquote, data is used to support a contention so drastic as to what it is that we're just hearing. It's terribly troublesome, and it's frankly, it serves nobody's interest, not the hitch, not agriculture, not the community. It only tends to foment terrible dissent based on false information. So those are my comments. Thank you.
And Sarah, you put something in the chat about just clarifying your statements, and I want you to know that those will be part of the record of the conversation, so that those, anything that appears in the chat appears in tandem in the meeting summary too. So.
Yeah, I mean, I know we don't want to go to a back and forth, but yeah, so I'm just making my statements by the text.
And those will be captured. I want to assure you that they will. Anything that's put in the chat for anyone is captured in our meeting summary notes. But I do want to give a member of the public who has joined us and has sat through the entire thing and is absorbing all the information at once, to just see if Joan has any questions or comments or anything.
Yes, yes, I do. I want to read from the Watershed Protection District about maintain high groundwater levels to prevent geothermal water intrusion.
And Joan, as you start to do that, can you tell people what it is that you're reading
This
from?
is the Lake County Watershed Protection District final Lake County Groundwater Management Plan. It's from 2006.
And that document appears on the website. in the
March
collection of-
31st,
Yep.
2006.
Yep, and it's on the website for anybody who wants to access it. Proceed. Sorry,
And-
Joan.
And I have read internet materials in which Lake County, no, California is sinking a foot a year. Okay, I'm very concerned about that. That's from a college. And I wanted to know about this geothermal water. Has the water been tested? Do we know what's in the water that people are using for agriculture now? And I also have something from Lake County Flood Control and Water Conservation District from May 2003. Groundwater recharge investigation update. Water shortages during drought that impact agricultural production and local domestic water supplies. Deterioration of groundwater due to intrusion of geothermal water containing iron and boron. This is from 2003, before this was written. Drying up of shallow wells during drought requiring deepening of wells or new sources of water supply. What I want to help and be constructive is put out a press release and get people to report their dry wells. They are afraid to report it. They live near vineyards. The vineyards have wells that are hundreds of feet deep. They have 100-foot well. And they don't have water. So I'm willing to participate in that way. I'm willing to read your report. It's very hard for me to believe. Okay?
So,
And understand.
and Joan, if we can take each of the things that you just said, I know the well reporting we talked about earlier in
Yeah,
the meeting.
it's in the report, yeah.
Yes.
29 dry wells.
Right,
So
so
I want to help you put your press release out and talk to people. So they're not afraid to tell you that they have real water. They are afraid. I want to tell you that. And once you get your statistics, maybe your analysis will be a little bit more reasonable. And I'm concerned for the hitch. I'm concerned for the children. I want to know what geothermal water is, and if the tests do show that we are essentially using geothermal water for agriculture, that's not healthy. I will stop talking now.
the two other pieces that I do, subsidence, do you, just what section can she find information about that?
Yeah, well, first of all,
Because that is one of the things we have to look at.
yeah, so we are gonna monitor for subsidence in Big Valley. There's been no historical evidence of subsidence in Big Valley.
The land sinking,
Land
Of
sinking,
what?
of
the
land
land
sinking.
sinking.
There's no historical evidence of subsidence or land sinking in Big Valley, like there is in other parts of California.
Okay.
But we're gonna monitor for that, which sort of leads into.
So that it doesn't happen.
But we're gonna monitor for that. We're gonna utilize satellite imagery to monitor for that, to ensure, as part of being sustainable, that we're not gonna have those kind of impacts.
Well, I will write my opinion, and I base what I write on what I read. Thank you.
And then just quickly on the water quality, from what we've seen with the sampling that we've done through DWR, the water quality is in very good shape in Big Valley. So I don't know your geothermal reference, what specific part of Lake County they're talking about, but in Big Valley, overall, the water quality is I would say superb. So.
Thank you. If you can show me the numbers.
Yeah, we actually just had a report done by DWR that went out and sampled half a dozen wells, and that's been shared. I don't think it's been shared with the GSPAC, but we have that somewhere we can share.
Okay, I quit. Thank you. I mean, I'm not quitting.
No,
I'm
no,
just
no,
stopping.
no, no. We don't want you to
Stopping.
quit. Sky, did you have a question?
Well, no, just a comment. I think it's really important to understand that this group is really only dealing with the Big Valley Basin. But subsidence, which is the land sinking, that has happened quite a bit historically in Scotts Valley. So these statements we're making here are just about Big Valley, not about the entirety of Lake County. So, and that's just important to get in, frame these discussions.
Thank you. Thank you for asking.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right, so if we have no more public comments, going once, going twice, sold, all righty. Let's go ahead and just do a brief update. I know Ibrahim touched on our future GSPAC meetings. So again, we have our GSPAC meetings the next one is taking place December 17th. That is a Friday. And again, moving forward, we will continue with these hybrid formats. We will plan to meet in here and then also via Zoom, unless the county does release new COVID protocol, which we will let everyone know. In the meantime, that is not being released, so we'll still plan on having hybrid meetings, but we will make sure to keep everyone on the listserv and the public notified if anything changes. And then after that, the next GSPAC meeting will be January 28th, again in a hybrid format via Zoom and then also in person. Go ahead, Eddie.
I just have one comment to end it whenever you're done.
Okay, yep, and then you can find all of the meeting materials, previous meetings, any presentations, all of that on the Water Resources website. And then just as we continue on with these conversations, just anticipate that we will be touching on the rechartering of our GSPAC charter, which will be taking place in the first quarter of 2022. So as we're moving forward, our next meetings, we will be highlighting that. So just keep that on your radar because we will be continuing on with these discussions. With that, I'm gonna pass it over.
No, I just wanted to kind of, I'll get myself on camera here, maybe. I just want to sort of end things on a positive note, and I think it was what you, Joan, you had brought up during the break, was, what's the definition of sustainability? How do we ensure sustainability, which is what these plans are going to do. We're essentially setting water levels, water quality goals, and we're going to work towards meeting those goals. So I think that's really important, but also I think going back to the stakeholder discussion, there are opportunities for conjunctive use. So, is pumping having an impact on the hitch? Yes, no, whatever side of the fence you're on is okay. But I think there's the ability through these conjunctive use projects to help all stakeholders, all groundwater dependent ecosystems. I think that's also part of the sustainability piece of it. So I think that's the big benefit is now groundwater is being brought to our attention. There's resources being put in place, and it gives us the ability, gives the county the ability to kind of help facilitate all stakeholders, domestic wells, ag wells, municipal wells, groundwater dependent ecosystems. I mean, that's the tool of what Sigma is all about. So I just wanted to kind of end that on a positive note.
Okay. Well, what's important is that we're talking.
Exactly.
Indeed, exactly that.
All right, do we have any questions on the upcoming public meetings? All right, seeing none, before I adjourn, I just want to remind folks, since this is our first hybrid meeting, that is very exciting. Once we adjourn the meeting, there will be no public comment, no more questions after we adjourn, just to make sure that our friends that are joining us via Zoom and our friends that are joining us in person, everyone is on the same page for that. We will continuously take public comments via email, which is water.resources@lakecountyca.gov. Please, please, please encourage folks to submit public comments. I will work and make sure that we do get those public comments posted and that press release in the local news. With that being said, we are going to go ahead and adjourn 1 minute early. Happy Friday, everyone. Thank you so much for spending your time with us, and we will see you all sooner than later.
Have a good Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Let's keep it forward.